Hello, and welcome to Driving Change, Addressing 5 Roadblocks to Omnichannel Engagement, a one-to-one media webinar sponsored by OpenText. I'm Myla D'Antonio, Editor-in-Chief of One-to-One Media, and your moderator for today's event. First, let me introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker is Marci Maddox, Senior Director of Product Marketing Customer Experience Management at OpenText. For the past 17 years, Marci has experienced firsthand the challenges and rewards of marketing and defining product strategy by developing and launching enterprise software for telecom, web, and enterprise information management companies. Today, she oversees the customer experience management portfolio of products within OpenText, helping organizations realize their digital experience vision with media, web, social, and correspondence solutions. Welcome, Marci.
Thank you.
Our second speaker is Don Peppers, acclaimed author and founding partner of Peppers & Rogers Group. The Times of London has listed Don among its top 50 business brains. Accenture has included him in its global list of the top 100 business intellectuals. And the UK's Chartered Institute for Marketing put him on the list of the 50 most influential thinkers in marketing and business today. In 2013, Don Peppers, along with his partner Martha Rogers, were introduced into the Direct Marketing Association Hall of Fame. You can follow Don on LinkedIn, where he is rated as a top 100 influencer for his regular blogs that serve as a popular voice in worldwide media. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Myla. Glad to be here.
Before I review the agenda, let's walk through the On24 interface. If you have a question for our two speakers, please click on the red Q&A icon. If you encounter any technical issues within the On24 system, please click on the gold question mark for a list of FAQs. We also encourage you to take our survey at the end of today's presentation. That's located just to the right of the speaker bios widget. All attendees will receive an email with a link to the archived version of this webcast. And finally, if you're tweeting today, the hashtag for this event is One-to-One Media. So let's move on to the agenda today. Don and Marci will discuss how to urge organizations to think strategically. They'll offer advice for connecting disparate content processes, channels, and systems. They'll talk about how to overcome operational internal complexity and inefficiencies. They'll give tips for getting suppliers and distributors on board with your omnichannel ideas. And they'll discuss how to secure funding for these new initiatives as well as building a business case. So let's get started. Everyone today is looking to achieve that omnichannel customer engagement goal, but many organizations are stalled by numerous roadblocks. For companies to succeed, they need to choose the path of least resistance. Sometimes that means individuals within organizations need to act as change agents to start conversations around overcoming organizational challenge and to lay the framework for evolving and transitioning to that nimble state where all customer engagement is personalized and delivered in an omni-channel way. Today, Don and Marci intend to lay out that framework to help you become omni-channel change agents in your organizations and to give you helpful insights and advice for removing any hurdles that may be blocking your path to true omnichannel customer engagement. So with that, I'll turn it over to Don, who will address the first roadblock.
Well, thanks, Myla. Yeah, let me talk about the first issue, which has to do with culture at an organization. And we all know what culture is. It's sort of like pornography. We'll know it when we see it. We might not be able to define it. But culture basically is what employees do when no one's looking. Lou Gerstner at IBM, when he successfully changed that company's culture, he said, until he came to IBM, he probably would have told you that culture was just one among several elements. But what he came to see in his time at IBM was that culture isn't just one aspect of the game; it is the game. There's probably no single internal asset to any company that's more important to it than its employee culture. As Peter Drucker famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So culture is a very, very strong force. But it can also be a problem, especially for any kind of transformation or customer-centered initiative. As another less famous pundit, Atul Gawande, said in his book, Being Mortal, he said, culture strangles innovation in the crib. And basically that's one of the problems. That's why it's a roadblock. because culture is like it's like a bunch of antibodies in an organism designed to prevent disease or outbreaks of change. Okay, so culture basically can completely stifle a change initiative unless it's the right kind of culture. So what is the right kind of culture? Well, in Collins and Porras' book, Built to Last, they identified a couple of dozen companies that tended to be perennially successful, and the only thing that these companies had in common was that each of them had a very strong culture, but the culture itself was not based on the product they were selling or the category they inhabited. It was based on some higher mission, some calling that the company had, providing entertainment to the world's families if you were Walt Disney, you know, healthcare for everybody if you're J&J. So that with that kind of mission, often codified into a series of contexts for the mission, the employees, when they're faced with a change, a disruption, a new technology, a competitive threat, they can give up the current product or service they're working on in order to accomplish their mission in a different way. They can be resilient, and that kind of a resilient culture is really, really critical. One of the most resilient cultures you'll find is a culture that's based on customer trust. That's why companies that base their entire business on the customer experience or what's best for the customer tend to be very innovative. Apple is a great case in point. For 40 years, Apple has been, 30 years anyway, Apple has been maniacally focused on the user experience, and that's it. They design products for the user experience. What that has done is that's allowed them to migrate from the computer business, the PC business, to they became a music company. They went into the phone business. They created the tablet category. And in each of these points, Apple's customers wanted them to succeed. They wanted to join in. And the employees themselves didn't feel threatened because they were continuing their mission of improving the user experience. USAA has a similar kind of culture where they want to treat the customer the way you'd like to be treated if you're the customer. They start every meeting with a statement that don't forget that we're acting here to try to make our members' lives more financially secure. Google wants to organize the world's information. You can name lots of different cultures, but most cultures that are based on some sense of mission, as long as that mission transcends the actual financial success of the company, that's an extremely strong and unifying culture that will sustain the right kind of change effort. Technology is never going to replace human judgment, all right? But it can enhance a decision maker's own humanity by it extends the breadth and impact of non-routine decisions. It boosts the quality, speed, and scalability of decisions, and it reduces low-value activities for high-value employees. So technology is a tool with which we can lever the cultural issues and impetus of our organization. Judgment, creativity, empathy, intuition, those are all human qualities, and they're never going to go out of fashion. They're never going to be automated. You'll be able to analyze X-rays in India, but bedside manner, that happens at the bedside. And you can automate how a sales call is recorded and reported, but you can't use a computer to look into a prospect's eyes and decide whether it's the right time to press for a sale. At least not yet, you can't do that. You can't prescribe what employees should do in situations that you cannot predict, okay? You need to empower your employees to act. And that's what culture does. It empowers employees to act. And there are some important implications for competition while we're at it. Because when you gain some efficiency from automating your production or your processes, that can easily be matched by your competitors. Eventually, automation in the category, it pervades the whole category. But when you actually have proficiency at making non-routine decisions, human-based decisions, that can't be easily imitated by a competitor. If you think about it, more complex organizational models will slow the dissemination of performance improvements. And really, what is a best practice in judgment-based decision-making anyway? Best practice in judgment-based decisions, it's good judgment. That's what it is. How do you get that? You have a good culture. That's how you get that, with educated employees. Those are not computer skills. Those are not automation benefits. Those are the benefits of a really good culture. So you can turn that first roadblock, culture, strangling innovation in a crib, you can turn that into a real asset if you have the right culture with the right sense of mission on the part of your employees.
Yeah, Don, I agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely. Culture is one of the biggest roadblocks. And just to share a bit of an example, I was told by a German bank, for example, that they'd been around for 150 years and they were very set in their ways. They had a standard culture. And you mentioned two words to me, resiliency of that culture, and second, the trust with that end consumer. And this particular German bank was being faced with a digital-first online banking initiative. They wanted to innovate, but yet their culture was very traditional. And the way that they overcame that roadblock was they ended up creating a separate department. They were digital technologists. They were a little bit on the marketing side, a little bit on the technology side, but they connected with that end consumer because they themselves were millennials. And they decided, you know what, we as a traditional bank are not going to define what the end user wants. We're going to bring the end users to us. And so having a separate group who was able to make recommendations to the traditional processes allowed that to happen. And I think for some of our audience here today, it's a little bit thinking outside the box. And I love this quote here about the more complex organizational models will be slow in dissemination of performance improvements. And we have to get out of that. And I think part of it is the culture, as it is so much empowerment of the employees to act on behalf of this omnichannel engagement that's facing us today.
Right, that's right. Empowering employees, that's sort of the name of the game, but you have to empower them the right way, for the right things. Yeah.
To buy the right thing. And to me, the next step with the next roadblock is that there are integration challenges that we have. When we look at the different systems that we have to deal with, and we all generally now know, if you've been on this webinar or a series or others, Omnichannel is pervasive. We want to be consistent with our end users. We want to give them performance improvements. We want to give them access through mobile devices and other things. But at the end of the day, you mentioned earlier about automation, and the technology itself cannot replace our human judgment. It can augment it. And let's take, for example, a digital content lifecycle. If you're on the marketing side joining us, or even if you're dealing in customer service, you probably have a process flow that you work through. I'm creating assets. I'm trying to manage them. I want to publish them out to the end users, deliver it in that omni-channel way. But the key point is here in the bottom left around automation. And it's bringing the enterprise information that's critical to that best digital experience, that end user, and not just thinking about the vision of omnichannel, but if we forget to move, we're moving at a speed of light toward mobile applications because that's what's hot and new and fun. We can't forget on the back-end systems that we have to integrate to make that possible. An example here we have coming up, I believe it's next week, the new Avengers movie is coming out. And my daughter asked me last night, well, I want to go watch all the movies that lead up to this current one that's coming out. How can I stream them? Do we have them? Or do I even look for them online to see if I can watch them? But if we don't integrate and have integration to all of those, in this case the movies, accessible to our fingertips, we aren't giving that best experience to that end user who, in this case, is a moviegoer that wants to spend money to go see it Thursday night at midnight when it first comes out before all of her friends do. So bringing together the integration of technologies together with the end user's expectations does take some work, and that to us is a roadblock that has to be overcome. Let's take, for example, a digital media value chain. So focus in on one of the most complex assets that we have to deal with in delivering and creating video. And if you think about the process of creating video, or it could even be as simple as an infographic, we have to identify, collaborate with teams. Maybe it's a digital agency that's outside, or we have an internal creative team that comes up with the final concept. We then have to get budget for the project. We have to produce the asset, and then we need to render it into these different formats: high definition, print-worthy, web formats. So going back to what you said earlier, yes, the technology can help us automate all those different format types, but I still need to bring intelligence to how that end user wants to see it. And again, pulling the movies from years ago, putting them in order, providing commentary, and bringing it to life again for something that may have been forgotten 2 or 3 years ago. Now, OpenText has defined this digital media supply chain as taking into account the different stakeholders, software applications, business processes, even regulations and digital rights that you have to manage. Because once you create your video and you're moving through the business process, you're creating the digital media supply chain that we have here in the middle section, at the end of the day, we have to store it for easier access. And these are not small files. We're talking terabytes of data that has to be stored, but we still want to get our fingertips on them very quickly. And to give an example, one American food manufacturer that I was talking to was facing a lawsuit because they did not obtain the digital rights to use a popular piece of music in their commercial advertisement. Had the company followed a digital media supply chain process, the contracts for using the song and the actors that were portrayed in the video would have been legally approved before the video reached their final distribution, and therefore avoiding the lawsuit situation. But it's not just about how we integrate systems and applications on the back end, but how we integrate in with the end consumer. Now, as you may have heard, I have younger children, and I will fully admit I do watch reality TV, and one of my favorites is American Idol. I love to see the success there. And one thing that they're doing this year is not only are you able to vote on your phone, on your web, etc., for your favorite singer, but now they are having live on television tweeting for your favorite song person to be saved. So they take the time in the last end of the show, they take 10 minutes, and they fill it with commercial and other commentary, and they have the people up there, but they're waiting for the end user to tweet their favorite song, their favorite performer. And so giving that access does take patience. It requires you to build it into the performance so that you can not only see the back-end systems, I'm watching Twitter, I have to do the count and have the big reveal. It is also about understanding what the end user and how they want to participate. And it's a change, and you have to try something new every year, every 6 months, whatever what might be changing on your market and the trends that we see.
That's very cool, Marci, and I think it leads right into another issue, and that has to do with if you just look at this digital media value chain and the other diagram you put together, basically there are many different parties in a company that are involved in managing the digital content, and if one of them makes a mistake or screws up in some way, it corrupts the whole chain. The truth is, when we try to treat customers differently, different customers differently, when we try to improve the individual customer experience, we should expect delays because there are all sorts of internal alignment issues that conflict with our achieving of this goal. Let me just give you a diagram here. I'll let you absorb that for a second. Basically, I use this diagram a lot to explain the difference between customer-centric competition and product-centric competition. Because fundamentally, there are two things any business has to do to be able to compete it has to be able to satisfy needs, and it has to have customers who want those needs satisfied. But if I focus on needs only, if I look at a particular need, I have a product that meets a certain need, I want to try to find as many customers as I can and want to have that need met. That's the horizontal bar. Or I could, instead, I could use technology to look at individual customers. I could study their needs, and I could look at an individual customer and try to focus on that customer and satisfy as many of that customer's needs as possible. And that's what I would call customer-centric competition. And these two forms of competition, while they don't technically conflict with each other, they're not in opposite directions, they're irrelevant to each other. The activities that you undertake in one realm are totally different from the other. The customer-centric realm, what you really want to do is you want to treat different customers differently. I treat you different from your neighbor, different from her neighbor, based on what I think I know about you, and that is one-to-one marketing, it's CRM, it's customer-centric competition. In order to do that, I have to have relationships with customers over time. These relationships go on over time. Now, most companies don't come to the customer-centric epiphany and just presto bismo, they change their company. They start as product-centric competitors, okay? Most companies start with different products. I have, each product has its own profit and loss, its own set of customers, and I'm out there, it meets a certain need, and I'm trying to satisfy that need for as many customers as I can find in each case. The problem is that when you overlay the customer-centered idea on the product-centered idea, what you get are a lot of little intersections where each of those is now a little tiny silo, where the customer actually has got its need met, and there are all sorts of issues involved in coordinating the activities for your marketing department, sales and service department, not to mention product manager A, product manager B, product manager C, and so forth. Just think about the accountabilities that you hold. You hold the product manager accountable for the profitability of a product, but is that the right way to align the organization, or should you hold customer managers who are accountable for the profitability of individual customers? If you made money on every customer, would it be okay to lose money on a product? See, those are alignment questions. In the product-centric direction, you have all sorts of activities involved. You know, you do market research and positioning, advertising, media buying, public relations, and so forth. Each of these activities, basically all these functions, they're centrally managed, and they're uniform across the enterprise. But contrast that with the customer-focused activities, and what you see is you have, you know, customer service and care, loyalty, retention, cross-selling, upselling, customer satisfaction. You know what? All of these functions are specific to individual customers. And so you have a group of organizational managers who are responsible for enterprise-wide functions like marketing and sales, and you have a group of managers who are now being asked to handle individual customer transactions, such as a cross-sell or upsell. So this creates serious alignment problems. It really does. Incentives, metrics, accountabilities are for the overall enterprise or a specific business unit. Should we promote product A or product B? Should we pay for customer acquisition, retention, or satisfaction? Corporate financial goals can easily be aligned with current sales, but what about future customer value? If I spend money to improve the customer experience so I get a more loyal customer, but I only get the value of that more loyal customer until later, how do I budget for the money it costs to improve the customer experience? That's an alignment problem. So one large telecom firm told me that the managers were all tasked with delivering higher NPS results, but guess what? One quarter, the results fell off, and the finance department, on its own initiative, decided to eliminate nearly all refunds to customers so they'd make their quarterly numbers. And guess what happened to NPS? That's an example of alignment problem. I think it's typical. For most companies, the single most valuable financial asset today is the customer base. That is, its customer equity. But 99% of corporate financial metrics simply don't take account of this asset. Name a corporate financial metric that takes account of the value of the company's customer base. Name one. Name one. There aren't any. There aren't any. You have to make them up. Traditional accounting tools are just not up to the task of monitoring the value of your customer base. But why else would you improve your customer experience if it weren't to increase the value of your customer base? So we can measure the increase in the customer service, but we don't link that to any kind of increase in the value of the customer base. I think you either need an owner-manager at the business, like Jeff Bezos at Amazon, for instance, okay, or you need specific agreement with respect to the financial value of various non-financial metrics. We increase NPS by 2 points. That's worth a 0.5% increase in the value of the customer base for that segment or whatever, something like that. You need explicit agreement so that you can talk to the finance people who manage the company at the top end.
So, Don, I'd like to drill into that for a second because I think you said something really, really important, which is this idea of having to pay for that customer engagement investment that we won't see the return on until later. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about defining a culture that will sustain you, realizing we might have to change what our culture is doing today. Maybe not the definition of our culture, because if you do have a sound one, like you mentioned J&J and Walt Disney, even Disney is trying to move into taking advantage of, the newer technologies, RFID and other things. They don't move away from their culture, but they are having to make that investment in their client base. So do you have other examples that, this tie between the executives looking for financial metrics or some hard numbers versus these softer metrics that we inherently feel in our gut? You mentioned Jeff Bezos. If we understand and take that leap into innovation, then that is a risk, absolutely, but it is a longer-term investment. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It is a long-term investment. And when I said that we treat different customers differently and relationships are required to do that, the reason a relationship is required with the customer is because the customer has a memory. They remember how you treated them today, and it affects how willing they are to buy from you tomorrow. Products don't have memories. How you treat a product today has nothing to do with its value to you tomorrow, but how you treat a customer today has everything to do with the customer's value to you tomorrow. Customer memories basically are the financial link between today's activities and your shareholder value over the long term. So I really think that's critical. The Bezos example it's a great case. Every quarter when Amazon reports its numbers, there's some Wall Street analyst somewhere who says, oh, this is terrible for shareholders. Their profit is not up as high as it could be again. We're waiting and waiting and waiting. We don't have any money. But guess what? Bezos owns 75% of Amazon. Okay, he is the shareholder, so he clearly is connected with the with shareholder value. It's the short-term Wall Street people who aren't, and I think that creates the tremendous alignment problem. And I also think it points out one more issue, and that is as companies become more and more ecosystems and networks of other providers, whether distributors or whatever, you're going to have external alignment problems also. You're going to have to align the whole ecosystem with your goal.
I'm going to jump right on that example and talk a little bit about alignment as well from that digital enterprise that you mentioned for the integration and internal alignment. You're absolutely right, and I see this happening a lot with external alignment, as you just mentioned. The digital ecosystem marrying up with the digital enterprise, having these digital transformations, and these are sort of buzzwords that we're trying to bring into more simpler terms as we look to this omni-channel customer engagement. I think we're familiar with where the external views are coming from, but to your point, it's the connections of that ecosystem that have to be synchronized. And I'll give you an example. There was a sports league that I was talking to, and while on one hand they are working with their telco cable providers to provide the sports teams games online, so you can stream them. You can also watch them on live television. They wanted to have statistics available to their clients, who in this case were the fans that wanted to pay to go to the game live, sit in the stadium, feel the excitement around them. And yet whenever the player made a goal, They were wanting to be on their mobile app, either tweeting about it, sharing it with their friends. They were trying to then look at statistics of that player, get background information. Having that integration tied to the ecosystem of the ticket sales, going back to your monetary comment, with having the accessibility of those statistics on the mobile device was going to get their emotional tie into that game as well, was going to increase their fan base. And that fan base, wasn't measured necessarily by only ticket sales. It was almost how much data is coming around and being interconnected so that at the very end, after the game is done, do we have residual discussions happening after the game, getting people more excited to attend or watch the next experience. And so here we see, in customer engagement, it is multiple things that are coming together, and we do have to look at the external outcomes, right? We don't necessarily want to move away from that. But what I would challenge our audience to look for today is, where are those back-end systems, the inventory management, having accessibility to your ERP and CRM systems, the connection points that are going to make that end consumer your constituent. If you're talking about a supplier or a distributor channel, it doesn't matter who that end audience is. They all want to have a level of expectation meet and exceeded by you as an organization. And so, for example, working out who these people are and influencing and bringing it all together, retailers like Nordstrom's in the U.S. or Harrods in the U.K. have a level of brand expectation that they have to meet. And in fact, one retailer in London I was talking to, going back to that culture side of the story, were willing to put a new retail shop in the middle of downtown London where they could listen to the needs of those end users and then tie that back to their processes, because they realized that I can have the most beautiful shop entrance, but if I'm not getting the most recent technology gadget or the most recent fashion in their hands and accessible, then I failed them, right? And I need to look at my supply chain on the back end as well. And I love that you brought up Amazon, because, and I know this isn't available everywhere in the world, so for those of you who are global, but in some U.S. cities, Amazon is now delivering products within a 2-hour window. Think about that, the logistical process to get what you want today, whether it's paper towels or laundry detergent. If I needed it within a 2-hour window, I can go online and request it. And getting all of those, the individual steps from inventory access and seeing what's there, even in local language, for those that are globally on this phone, you might want to provide a consistent and accurate brand experience where a clothing retail manufacturer, maybe coming out with their new spring line, the photos that they show of that new line in Milan need to be different than the one they show in China or in Israel, because they need to be personalized. I think you said it earlier, Don, about we treat different people differently. And in order to do that, we also need our suppliers and logistics and processes on the back end to keep up with that. And so it is a challenge. It is a roadblock to achieving this omnichannel experience if our suppliers and the back end systems are not also caught up with that.
Yeah, I agree, and not only that, it's a problem if you're let's say you're a retailer and your online presence is managed by different people than your in-store presence. For instance, just to go back to London, since we're on the topic, John Lewis is a retailer well known for its very high level of customer service in London. When my wife and I lived in London, we used to use John Lewis all the time because, if there was any problem with the product, they always, took it back. They would repair it or give us another one. We could really rely on them. They've had a well-earned reputation for good customer service. And they introduced a program called Click and Collect, where you can shop John Lewis's online website and click on a product, and then you can literally just go to the store and collect it that day if you want. You can get it that day. And one of the problems they had, however, that they hadn't counted on was that consumers would come into the store and they'd been online. They'd spent an hour online and they can't find what they wanted. Now they're in the store and they want to navigate the store. So what they began doing was they began just this last Christmas season, they equipped all their sales personnel in the store with tablets. And all you have to do as a customer is you come in, you identify yourself, I call up your profile, I look at the stuff that you were looking at, I have access to your quick streams, I know what you were looking for, and I can find it. And that's an example of trying to align the, this website provision with the online retail store, with the in-store retail physical store.
I agree.
So,
I mean, just talk about the trust that you said earlier that you're evaluating and getting that buy-in here.
Right.
Wi-Fi being accessible, it is a technology investment that you need to make, but at the same time, it's an ease of access to anything. And we used retail here examples, but whether you're a utility provider and you're trying to get that same access to your service technicians who are going in the field, I'm glad you brought up tablets because I need access to the maintenance of a piece of equipment. We can't forget that there's also more practical uses of these same concepts even in that world.
Right.
So I love the fact that you're bringing that in.
And our last obstacle, the issue of creating buy-in at a company, it brings us sort of back to the mindset or culture at the company itself. I often use this diagram that I have in front of you. I say customer experience can play out in 4 different ways, okay, based on how engaged the customer is in the experience and how easily it is to standardize that experience, okay? So in the lower right-hand quadrant on this diagram, you have customer experiences that are easily standardized and where the customer is not really very engaged. And this is what I would call business as usual. These are the things that happen by the hundreds every day. You've automated them. They work on a streamlined basis. Not a problem. In the lower left quadrant are threats to cost efficiency. And basically here you have a situation where the customer is still not very engaged in this particular experience, but you haven't standardized it. You haven't streamlined the processes. You haven't automated it. And so therefore, every time you have to deal with this experience, it's a threat to your cost efficiency. Your goal should be to streamline these events. In the upper right-hand quadrant, here you have events that are anticipated and routinized. The processes are standardized, but these customer experiences are things that the customer is very involved in. The member or customer of your customer base is interested in this. So, for instance, if you have let's say you're a mobile phone company. When you sign up a new customer, the day that new customer receives his first bill from you, he's going to be highly engaged in that bill. And probably he's going to call in and ask, why is it higher than I thought it was? What am I paying here? How do I understand this? Whatever. A lot of them do. But you can anticipate that. Everybody gets a first bill. So you can plan for that. You can plan for that event. That's a predictable customer lifecycle event. In the upper left-hand quadrant, these are where we have the surprises and trials and tribulations. These are events where the customer is highly engaged. Okay, it's very important to the customer, this experience, but you have not anticipated this experience. This is a surprise to you. You haven't been able to automate. You don't have process routinization here, and this is where you need your employees to be able to make non-routine decisions. That's different from routine decisions. A non-routine decision is a decision that takes judgment or empathy or wisdom, experience. It requires that the employee have 2 qualities. The employees have to be engaged in their work, and they have to be enabled to take the action. What do I mean by that? Engaged employees are employees who buy into your central mission. They like working where they're working. They tell their friends where they're working. They're proud of it. They see their mission as being something other than simply shareholder value. It's, making the world safe for, customers or whatever, which is the Peppers and Rogers Group mission. It's some mission that goes beyond just profit and loss and shareholder value. And they endorse that mission. They're proud of it. They want to help do that. And they're enabled. What I mean empowered to make a decision, authorized, okay, to take action. But in addition to that, they have been trained in how to do that. They have access to the right data and tools necessary to make the right decision. So if they're engaged and they're enabled, then you have an employee base that is more and more self-organized. The problem comes in, some customer has some problem, employees, they all kind of know what to do, they know the direction of success, and they go onto the problem and they solve it. They may not solve it the same way every time, but it's a non-routine problem. It doesn't recur very much, and you want your employees to be able to fix those problems on an ad hoc basis on their own initiative if at all possible. Now, Hay Group says there are 4 basic qualities, requirements to engage employees. An engaged employee has to have confidence in the organization's leaders. The environment has to facilitate collaboration and collegiality. You know, it's friendly. People are friends together. They go out. They have fun. There are development opportunities for the employee. It can't be just a dead-end job for me. I've got to see an opportunity to advance to my full potential. And finally, engaged employees need to see this, what I referred to as this sense of purpose, this clear and promising sense of purpose. In fact, Hay Group says that this is the single most important aspect of all, that if employees all are united by a mission of some kind, then what really happens is they exert peer pressure on each other to conform to that mission, to let's support that mission. And in fact, that's a very, very powerful form of motivation. Because don't forget, the more we automate things, the fewer routine tasks we have to trust to employees. You know, we're automating accountants out of their jobs. We're automating, we don't have to have secretaries much anymore. And, you know, you don't have to have a personal assistant fill out your sales report. You can do that online in the cloud with your CRM tool. So in a sense, all the routine stuff is being automated, and what's left is all the non-routine stuff. So you need to motivate these very high-value employees who are making judgment decisions and creative decisions. You don't motivate a person involved in the creative process through money. You know, obviously they've got to make money. They've got to make enough money that they're not distracted from their job or unhappy with it. But fundamentally, it's, you know, you can't pay somebody and here's an extra $1,000. Have another brilliant idea. It doesn't happen that way. You know, people are motivated, however, by things like autonomy of decision making. I can act on my own, or the support of a team, or a cohesive group. You know, I'm not going to let my team down. And they're motivated by a purpose-driven profession or career. You know, I know what I'm doing. I'm crafting the best user experience in a mobile phone that there is. My personal feeling is that when you infuse your organization with a culture of customer trust, you provide the ideal platform for maximizing these motivations. You empower your employees and engage them at the same way, in ways that will resonate for your business in the long term as they rise in productivity and they solve problems before you even know that you had a problem. You want your employees acting on their own, but of a mind. Basically, that's the message here for creating buy-in from my standpoint.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue that concept of buy-in, where you're mentioning, buy-in with the employees, that they are developing that customer trust. And I love that first bill example that you gave, where we can almost anticipate what is that next best experience that we're going to provide our end users. And I'm going to marry your buy-in with a technology and finance buy-in, because I think, as we talked about to our audience on this call today, is we still have to find the funds to deliver the technologies, those tools that we can enable our employees with to deliver out to this omnichannel engaged society. And what we find is that it is not a 2-day or a 2-month or maybe even a 2-year process. This could be a 5-year plan that you're having to work toward. And what I'm seeing some organizations do is lay out what you have in your digital journey today. You might be looking at, older computers, mainframes, even paper forms that might be sitting in a back office. And if you're able to lay out this journey to this newer technology, you're using RFID, Wi-Fi you mentioned earlier, in the cloud, tablets, we know that we need to move this way, but we have to find the funds. And part of that is going to be in order to make that investment in those long-term relationships, we need to streamline our back-end process. And that may mean decommissioning a mainframe storage in order to pay for a smart system, for example. And put that journey together and then identify those streamlined savings because, we're not seeing a whole lot of new investment. Money's just, floating out there on its own. We have to show and give executive buy-in to a longer-term journey of transformation. So here, this 5-year plan may be something that is realistic for you to be smarter in your digital journey for your end consumers. It could just be simple productivity enhancements. And if there's not very tangible metrics, we talked about that a little earlier, like Net Promoter Score and the financial metrics that our accountants look for, but ultimately we do need to identify those investments for our customers' long-term journey with us. So with that, I think we're nearing our end of our presentation. Final thoughts, Don, on just sort of where culture, internal, external alignment comes from to engage our end users in this omnichannel world?
Well, I think you have to build culture from the bottom up. You can't install it from the top down. So the best culture change initiatives I've seen are ones where the managers at the company, even the CEO, will recruit influential employees, well-connected employees who have a lot of credibility with their colleagues, and have them craft the the set of values and so forth. And that would be my recommendation, when you're doing it.
And my key takeaway was that customer memories are the tie to your financial success. I love that part. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mila and see if we have any open questions.
Great. Thanks, Marci. And thank you, Don, to both of you for your insights on reaching true omnichannel engagement. I really enjoyed all the examples that you provided today, so thank you so much for that. And for our audience, we're about to kick off our Q&A session, so get your questions ready. First, I'll offer a few reminders. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can click the green resource icon to download the PDF. If you missed any part of this webinar or want to see it again, everyone will receive an email with a link to the archived version. So I'd like to remind everyone also to please take the survey during the Q&A period coming up next. And you can access this survey by clicking on the survey icon just to the right of the speaker bios. So let's begin our Q&A. To ask a question for Don or Marci, please click the red Q&A icon at the bottom of your console. And if we don't get to your question again, we'll email you a response. So our first question, it looks like it's for Don. How can I make our customer experience journey more compelling?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's, by the way, I think it's a question that there are a lot of companies wrestling with right now. I see companies all over the world coming to the realization that their customers are a real asset, and they want to improve the experience that they offer to these customers. I would argue that the customer experience really has to have kind of two qualities. First of all, it's got to be functional. It's got to be frictionless for the customer to meet his need and get his problem solved. And frictionless customer experience is one where the product works as advertised, the information is used in the experience so that it's relevant to the customer. You don't have to ask the customer to restate his details over and over again. There's value in it for the customer, that there's a value proposition that's obvious to both the customer and the marketer. And I also think that a frictionless experience is one that is fundamentally trustable. And what I mean by that is that the company is acting in a proactively trustworthy manner for the customer, reminding the customer. The way Amazon does, and I hate to use Amazon over and over again as a good example, but it is a good example of customer-centric competition. If you order a book or anything in Amazon that you've already ordered before they sell it to you, they'll remind you that you bought this book before. Are you sure you want to buy this again? That's an example of being trustable or proactively trustworthy. And once your customer experience is frictionless and functional so that it works just like it's supposed to, and it doesn't cost the customer any time or effort, any extra problems, at that point, when you get there, then you should also try to see if there aren't ways that you can make your customer experience more enjoyable and human. That is, humanity in the customer experience, I think, is a really critical issue. I can make a customer experience frictionless by using automation, right? And that's, in fact, one of the key reasons for automation, is to suck the friction out of our daily existence. And you suck the friction out of your customer's experience by automating it to the extent possible. But then when you go beyond that, then you want to, that's where you get to the possibility of surprising or delighting a customer. And what I mean by that, you could do a couple things. You could do something that is unexpected, and I think an unexpected thing, machines don't come up with unexpected stuff, okay? And that's a human issue. If you have a surprise, and it doesn't have to be expensive, it could be a very simple thing. It could be a human interaction like a written thank you note, but the thank you note needs to be personal. It can't just be a standard type of thank you for your business, blah, blah, blah. I know when I check into a hotel, I do a lot of business travel, and I check into a hotel frequently. There'll be a note in my room signed by the manager. Hope you have a good stay. But it's as nice as that is, it's not super, because they don't really know me. And I stayed at that hotel like a year and a half ago, and there's no acknowledgement of that. There's no, you see what I'm saying? You want to make those experiences as relevant to customers as possible, and you introduce a human connection to the extent possible. I think that's the way you improve the customer experience for customers.
I'd like to add on to that, because I also agree with this whole surprise and delight aspect to it. And I can say that technology, like analytics, and can be useful for you. And in fact, I had one organization tell me that what they would do in their customer loyalty program, they were a telco mobile provider, is they, as part of their loyalty program, just to keep their customers on anticipation of what might come next, is in their billing statement, they would interject free minutes to talk versus free minutes for texting. But they tailored it. So if I like to talk on the phone to my girlfriends a lot, then I would get free minutes, because maybe I don't text as often. And so therefore, it wouldn't mean as much to me if you gave me 100 free texts. But if you gave me 100 free minutes just for being a loyal customer, how great is that? And this particular telco provider kind of called it their Christmas in their bills. You don't expect it, but boy, as a loyal customer, wouldn't I be one to go off and tell my friends, hey, this is my telco provider, and look what they just gave me. I share that humanity piece of it. Yes, there was technology that helped to figure out on the back end that I like talking more than texting, but it was still a thought of being able to put it in the bill, making it relevant right there when I see it, because everyone's going to at least glance at their current bill and be able to now expect it. Will I get one another time? Will I get it again? So I love that idea.
Thank you, Marci. We have another question that came in, Have either of you seen cultural shifts in an organization where the top, the executives, did not get the need for the initiative? And if so, what was the process in getting them on board? Who'd like to go first?
Well, I'll go first for a couple of examples that come to mind. Yes, you're right. Executive buy-in is difficult to gain if it's not a top-down culture where we mentioned Amazon and Jeff Bezos, where he sees a vision, or when Steve Jobs saw a vision around Apple. What I've found is that it comes back to the hard metrics. So if you're able to put together the plan, and maybe you had a project, and in this case, this particular organization was in a nonprofit sector, so they didn't have a lot of money to spend, but what they saw happening with their end users outside the organization, there was a groundswell of requests for information, and they weren't finding it within the organization themselves, so they were going outside. And that led to a brand issue because this nonprofit wanted to build the exposure as a trusted organization that you're making donations to. And so look outside the organization as well. Where are there opportunities that if you brought it in-house, it didn't cost you anything because it was already happening outside the organization, and use that as buy-in for the executives to see, okay, if we can bring this same concept where this media, technology, et cetera, was out there already, then that gives you some level of justification to make change inside the organization.
Great advice. We have another one, and our audience member would like to know how I can ensure brand consistency across channels and interactions over time. Marci, would you like to try that one as well?
Yeah, so that kind of builds on this whole idea of leveraging external ecosystems. We mentioned it earlier in the presentation, because your brand is not just what you want it to be, it's what your end users are building on behalf of you. And I love that Don brought up John Lewis, for example. They put in processes within the organization to ensure that their brand is built up as an easily accessible, trusted retailer. And that empowerment that happens means not only am I as an employee given the control to say, you know what, if I need to give a free month's worth of product, I'm empowered to do that, and I know I have my executive support to do that. And so brand consistency is both not only just the technical side of, is my brand logo consistent from an imaging perspective on every channel I try to push it out to, but am I also giving that consistency internally such that the end users out there, my clients who are interacting with me, are propagating the same message? And that only happens if you already have the processes and procedures, technologies in place that make that happen.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. So what does one look for in a technology solution or solutions in connecting all of this?
So I'll take a first stab, and I'd like to see, Don, if you have some examples as well. To me, and where we kind of look at technology is everything from what's happening inside an organization. I gave an example of, it happened to be a steel manufacturer who was going back into look at their architecture, getting their IT teams to look at systems that weren't being used anymore. How can we streamline our processes and look at all the technology side? But there's also recognition of the idea of consumer buy-in or consumer applications and technologies that might come inside our organization that we also have to deal with. And part of the culture change may also need to adopt newer technologies. I gave the example of a utility company that was giving the tablets to their service technician to take out. And these were business devices that were preloaded with applications. I've seen other organizations for their sales force preloading tablets with videos and sales order forms just to make it easier to have that information when they need it out there in the field. So it doesn't have to necessarily be internal applications that I access sitting at my desk, but it's also how I can use those same technologies to bring the process and applications out into the world where I need it the most.
And the one thing I would add to those criteria on technology is if you're looking at a specific technology capability, be sure to ask whether it's available in the cloud, where you don't have to pay for a lot for installing it, and it's not a capital expense, it's an operating expense. There are a lot of advantages to this, and you can sometimes try a technology for a while and test it. You don't have to go all in. Also, to the extent that the technology is open or has open source capability of or qualities, and is there a user community around the technology? But I'd look for that. So you want it's sort of the wisdom of the crowd as opposed to simply the engineering department at the technology company that's supporting the product. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. So thank you so much for that advice, Don and Marci. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So this concludes our webinar, Driving Change, Addressing 5 Roadblocks to Omnichannel Engagement, a one-to-one media webinar sponsored by OpenText. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for attending and have a great day.